Bigger beats and pie.
It's the moon, let's an episode here.
I've always been a fan of podcasts. I first got into podcasts with the Adam Carolla Show back in high school, but let's just say my tastes have become quite a bit more refined since then. The F+, My Brother and Me, you name it, I've listened to it. But everything changed when I started listening to Post Game of Thrones, a podcast by a friend of a friend from Tumblr. Next thing I knew, I was listening to all the noise-based podcasts, from Island Shuffle to Live Free Twihard, but one that particularly caught my eye was Nana Roy's NIGHTMARINARA by Roy Fuckwarlock. I scrolled through the feed on Pocket Casts, looking for an episode to listen to. They all sounded great, and I knew that a good time would be had regardless of the episode of which I selected, but I couldn't help but notice something strange. There was no episode 11. Well, I've never been one to shy away from a mystery, so I didn't. But then it was 10 years later now. 10 long years had passed since episode 11 went missing. And I found it. I was at an unassuming garage sale, in the garage of an unassuming man with an eye patch and a hood and a peg leg and a hook for a hand. He looked off, but I decided to shop at his garage sale anyway. Boy, would I regret it. He showed me his selection of used smartphones, basically the future equivalent of a phone. One of them was an iPod, which had quite the selection of used podcasts. And I scrolled through it, and imagine my surprise when I saw it. NIGHTMARINARA, episode 11.mp3. I just about shit my skeleton right then and there, but I kept it together. How much for the pod? I asked the regular man, noticing that he was playing a hurdy-gurdy by this point. For you? Free of charge, he growled. That sounds great. That sounds great, I said, and he gave me the iPod, basically an old version of a phone. I took it home and got to work listening to the iPod. I sat down at my desk, where I always sit down when I listen to podcasts, and I plugged in my headphones, and I put them on my ears so I would be able to hear the podcast, and I pressed play, making the podcast start playing. Boy, would I regret it. The episode started regular, as Roy and the guest, who said his name was Mr. Abe Maz Atnas, and boy would that scare me later, started talking about McCondless creepypasta. I laughed all the way through at how good the episode was. But as the episode continued, something started to get weird. And the weird started to get scary until I was scared with terror at the episode. It all started 40 minutes in, when Roy started talking backwards. I thought this was pretty funny. Classic Roy. But then it started to get scary when Roy started making static noises for 5 minutes. I thought this was pretty funny, but until it wasn't funny anymore. The episode started to get distorted and playing backwards, so the backwards speech started to become forwards and I could understand it again. It turns out the backwards speech was Roy and Aboz chanting demonic chantings in Latin or something. My iPod started to bleed, which it's not supposed to do. My headphones also started screaming in pain until I took them off and shot them with my dad's gun. I couldn't hear the episode anymore, so the iPod started playing the episode on its own. And this was a model of iPod that did not have speakers, so I was like, what the fuck? At this point, I was started to think the episode might be haunted, so I started to get scared. The static came back and lasted for over an hour this time. By the time it was over, I wanced having much fun indeed. I almost started to cry, I was so scared. And then, it happened. Ronald McNaldo himself knocked on my door. Of course, the door was closed, so I didn't know it was him. Oh, how I wish I had. I opened the door for Ronald Molanda, and he walked straight in, and his legs were so long. He wrapped his legs around my neck and choked me and opened his mouth and only static came out. That was when I noticed something odd about Rondi Lalandi's color scheme. It was backways. He was actually a negative image in terms of the colors, where the colors were flipped backwards like they were the opposite of how they were supposed to look. Shit! He knocked me out by choking me, and I woke up in an Italian restaurant. That's not where Ronald Gonzalez works, I screamed, but he just laughed and said,
No, you fucking dork.
Roy walked out of the shadows and started throwing meatballs at me. The meatballs were so hot that they burned my skin and it hurt so bad I started to cry. Why, Roy? Why are doing this? I said between mouthfuls. Some of the meatballs went into my mouth because I was crying so hard that my mouth was wide open and the meatballs fit perfectly into my mouth. Because, Roy began, this is the lost episode. You shouldn't have listened to it, Roy explained. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I pleased it and cried, but it was to no avail. My mouth was already full, and I couldn't actually say any of the words because of the meeptall they were in my mouth. They were pretty good, I had to admit. And that made this all the sicker, perfectly seasoned. And then I choked to death and woke up in hell. And then I woke up in my bed and it was all a dream. And let's just say, I'll stick with the Adam Carolla Show from now on.
McDonald's is a place to rock. It is a restaurant where they buy food to eat. It is a good place to listen to the music. People flock here to get down to the rock music. Rock and roll!